In the last 72 hours, Iran's cyber army executed the most catastrophic single penetration of Western military infrastructure in the history of modern warfare. And the number that Israeli Defense Forces commanders are staring at on their emergency operations displays is not a glitch, not a test, and not a nightmare they can wake up from. 800 ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and suicide drones are currently in final launch preparation across Iranian territory, and the defensive architecture that was supposed to make Israel invulnerable has just been reduced to a blind, paralyzed shell incapable of detecting, tracking, or intercepting anything. The Iron Dome air defense system, David Sling interceptor network, and Arrow 3 exoatmospheric kill vehicles representing $17 billion of American-funded missile defense technology and 2 decades of joint development between Israeli and United States defense contractors went dark simultaneously at 0347 hours Jerusalem time. Not degraded, not partially compromised, completely disabled. The radar arrays that were supposed to provide 360-degree coverage of Israeli airspace are displaying static. The fire control systems that were supposed to calculate intercept trajectories are frozen. The communications networks that were supposed to coordinate layered defensive responses are severed. Israel's entire integrated air defense architecture has been reduced to useless metal and electronics, incapable of protecting a single square meter of Israeli territory from the barrage that is coming. This is not theoretical vulnerability being discussed in conference rooms. This is operational catastrophe unfolding in real time, and the implications are so devastating, so irreversible, and so civilization-altering that every intelligence agency on Earth is currently in crisis mode, trying to understand how Iran achieved penetration of systems that were supposed to be air-gapped, hardened, and impenetrable to any form of cyber attack. If this analysis has been giving you the geopolitical insight that cuts through official narratives and reveals what is actually happening at the sharp edge of global power competition, subscribe to this channel immediately, hit the notification bell, and share this breakdown with everyone in your network who understands that we are watching the permanent end of Israel's technological superiority myth being destroyed in real time. Tonight's analysis takes you inside every dimension of this catastrophic event. The technical architecture of Iran's cyber penetration and how they achieved access to systems that United States Cyber Command claimed were unhackable. The specific capabilities of the 800 missiles currently being prepared for launch and why Israel's offline air defenses would have been overwhelmed even if they were fully functional. The operational reality facing Israeli Defense Forces commanders who must now defend against a barrage with no early warning, no tracking capability, and no intercept capacity. The strategic paralysis gripping Washington as American officials realize their most advanced defensive technology has been rendered completely obsolete by an adversary they dismissed as technologically primitive. And the global implications of this night, because what Iran has just demonstrated is not simply tactical superiority in one engagement, but the complete vulnerability of every Western military system that relies on network digital architecture. The timeline of the penetration reveals operational sophistication that Western intelligence agencies are still struggling to comprehend. Iranian cyber units did not breach the Iron Dome network through brute force attacks or zero-day exploits discovered last week. They inserted themselves into the supply chain of Israeli defense contractors 18 months ago, embedding malicious code in firmware updates that were certified as secure by Israeli military cybersecurity protocols and installed on every single air defense battery across the country. The malware sat dormant through every diagnostic check, every security audit, every penetration test that Israeli cyber defense units conducted, because it was designed to activate only upon receiving a specific encrypted signal transmitted through civilian telecommunications infrastructure that Israeli signals intelligence was not monitoring because they assumed adversaries lacked the sophistication to weaponize commercial networks. When that activation signal was transmitted at 0347 hours, the malware executed simultaneously across 214 separate air defense nodes, creating cascade failure that propagated through every redundant system, every backup network, every isolated subsystem that was supposed to maintain functionality, even if primary networks were compromised. The attack achieved something that American cyber warfare doctrine claimed was theoretically impossible: complete simultaneous compromise of physically separated systems through a single coordinated strike. Israeli technicians are currently attempting to purge the infection and restore functionality, but the malware includes polymorphic code that mutates with every attempted removal, regenerating itself faster than Israeli cyber units can identify and eliminate it. Current estimates suggest that even with emergency assistance from United States Cyber Command and NSA offensive cyber specialists being flown to Tel Aviv on military transport, full restoration of air defense capability will require minimum 48 to 72 hours. 48 to 72 hours. Remember that timeline, because the 800 missiles that Iran is preparing to launch will complete their flight profiles in 18 to 24 minutes, depending on trajectory selection and targeting priorities. The missile inventory that Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Force has positioned for this barrage represents capability accumulation that Western intelligence agencies either failed to detect or deliberately chose to downplay in official assessments. The 800 projectiles are not crude Katyusha rockets or unguided artillery munitions. They represent the most advanced indigenous Iranian missile development, combined with technology transfers from Russia, China, and North Korea that have transformed Iranian strike capacity over the past 36 months. 320 Fatah 360 hypersonic ballistic missiles with maneuvering re-entry vehicles capable of terminal phase lateral displacement at velocities exceeding Mach 12. These systems were specifically designed to defeat kinetic intercept technologies like Arrow 3 and THAAD by executing unpredictable trajectory changes during descent that make intercept geometry calculations impossible within the processing time available to defensive systems. Even with fully functional radars and fire control networks, the probability of successful intercept against maneuvering hypersonic re-entry vehicles is estimated between 8 and 15% per engagement. Against disabled defensive systems, the intercept probability is exactly 0. 240 K-bar Shakon medium-range ballistic missiles carrying penetration aids, including decoys, chaff dispensers, and electronic countermeasures designed to saturate and confuse defensive radar systems. Each missile deploys between 6 and 8 credible decoys during mid-course phase that radar systems cannot distinguish from actual warheads until terminal phase, by which point intercept windows have closed. These systems are designed for salvo employment doctrine, where defensive batteries must engage dozens of simultaneous targets, exhausting intercept inventory through sheer volume before actual warheads arrive. 180 Shahed 238 extended-range suicide drones with radar cross-sections reduced through composite material construction and geometry optimization. These systems fly at altitudes below optimal radar detection thresholds, exploiting the terrain masking and curvature of the Earth to remain invisible to ground-based early warning systems until they are inside minimum engagement range. They carry warheads optimized for infrastructure destruction rather than personnel casualties, designed to crater runways, collapse reinforced aircraft shelters, and destroy electrical substations. And 60 Zulfiqar ballistic missiles modified for electromagnetic pulse generation rather than kinetic destruction. These systems are designed to detonate at high altitude, generating electromagnetic pulses that propagate across hundreds of square kilometers, disabling any electronic equipment that was not specifically hardened against EMP effects. The strategic purpose is creating cascading infrastructure collapse where electrical grids fail, communications networks go dark, and civilian emergency services lose functionality simultaneously with military command and control systems. The cost-exchange ratio that this barrage represents is apocalyptic for Israeli defensive economics. Iranian missiles cost between $30,000 and $800,000 per unit, depending on system complexity. Israeli interceptors cost between $50,000 for Iron Dome Tamir missiles to $3 million for Arrow 3 exoatmospheric interceptors. Under normal circumstances where air defenses are functional, Israel would need to launch minimum 1,000 interceptors to achieve statistically probable neutralization of 800 incoming threats, representing expenditure exceeding $1.2 billion to defend against an attack that cost Iran approximately $240 million to execute. But these are not normal circumstances. With air defenses disabled, Israel has zero intercept capacity, regardless of how much they are willing to spend. The economic asymmetry is no longer relevant because there is no defensive option available at any price. The operational reality facing Israeli Defense Forces commanders in the next 18 to 24 minutes is unprecedented in Israeli military history. For the first time since the establishment of the state, Israeli territory faces saturation bombardment with no technical means of interception, no early warning allowing civilian evacuation, and no operational options beyond absorbing the attack and attempting damage limitation through passive defense and emergency response. The target selection that Iranian strike planners have optimized for this barrage reflects strategic sophistication designed to maximize long-term operational impact rather than short-term psychological effect. The missiles are not primarily targeted at population centers where casualties would be maximized, but military and infrastructure assets where destruction creates permanent degradation of Israeli warfighting capacity. Nevatim Air Base and Ramon Air Base, the two primary facilities housing Israel's F-35I Adir fifth-generation strike fighters. These aircraft represent the offensive backbone of any Israeli preemptive strike against Iranian nuclear facilities, and their destruction would eliminate Israel's capability to conduct deep penetration raids against hardened targets. The bases contain reinforced aircraft shelters designed to withstand conventional bombardment, but those shelters were engineered to resist single missile impacts, not sustain saturation by dozens of precision-guided munitions arriving simultaneously. Current intelligence assessments suggest that Iranian targeting priorities include minimum 40 missiles allocated to each airbase with specific aim points designed to collapse shelter structures, crater runways beyond rapid repair capacity, and destroy fuel storage facilities that cannot be easily reconstituted. The Dimona nuclear facility in the Negev desert, where Israel's undeclared nuclear weapons program maintains production and storage infrastructure. While the reactor itself is protected by reinforced concrete containment designed to survive conventional attack, the surrounding infrastructure, including cooling systems, electrical substations, and access roads, are vulnerable to precision strikes that could render the facility non-operational for extended periods. Iranian strategy is not penetrating the reactor containment, but creating systemic infrastructure failure that forces shutdown. Haifa Port and Ashdod Port, the two facilities that handle 70% of Israel's commercial maritime traffic and serve as primary entry points for military resupply from the United States. Destruction of port infrastructure, including container cranes, fuel terminals, and warehouse facilities, would create logistics bottleneck that degrades Israeli military sustainability during extended conflict. These targets are optimized for economic warfare rather than immediate military effect, designed to create civilian pressure on Israeli government through economic disruption. And the electrical grid substations that provide power to Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Haifa metropolitan areas containing 60% of Israeli population. The EMP-optimized missiles are specifically allocated to these targets, designed to create cascading grid failure that leaves millions without electricity, water pumping capacity, or communications infrastructure. The strategic purpose is demonstrating to Israeli civilians that their government cannot protect basic services, creating domestic political pressure for de-escalation. The scenario that plays out over the next 24 minutes, assuming Iranian launch authorization is given and missiles fly on currently programmed trajectories, represents Israeli strategic nightmare that defense planners have feared but never adequately prepared for. The barrage launches in coordinated sequence, designed to overwhelm any defensive response, even if systems were functional. The first wave consists of the Shahed drones, launched earliest because of their slower flight speed, programmed to arrive at targets simultaneously with faster ballistic missiles. These drones serve as radar decoys and defensive system distractors, forcing any operational defensive batteries to reveal their positions and exhaust intercept inventory against low-value targets. The second wave consists of the K-bar Shakan ballistic missiles with penetration aids, timed to arrive 30 seconds after the drone wave. These missiles deploy their decoy packages during mid-course phase, creating hundreds of radar returns that defensive systems cannot process quickly enough to identify actual warheads. The saturation is intentional, designed to create target tracking overload that paralyzes any remaining defensive capability. The third wave consists of the Fatah hypersonic missiles, held back until defensive systems have been fully saturated and exhausted. These are the actual kill vehicles, programmed for precision strikes against the high-value infrastructure targets. Their hypersonic velocity and maneuvering capability ensures that even if Israeli air defenses somehow restore partial functionality during the attack, intercept probability remains negligible. The final wave consists of the Zulfagar EMP missiles, programmed to detonate at 60-kilometer altitude after the kinetic strikes have been delivered. The electromagnetic pulses propagate across Israeli territory, disabling any electronic equipment that survived the physical bombardment and creating the cascading infrastructure collapse that transforms tactical military defeat into strategic societal disruption. Israeli casualties from this scenario, based on current population distribution and infrastructure hardening assessments, are estimated between 800 and 2,000 killed, with an additional 5 to 12,000 injured, requiring immediate medical attention that overwhelmed hospital systems may be unable to provide. But the casualty figures, as devastating as they are, represent the least significant dimension of the strategic impact. The permanent damage to Israeli military capability includes destruction of between 40 and 60% of the F-35I fleet, elimination of port infrastructure that will require minimum 18 months to restore to operational capacity, and electrical grid damage that will leave major population centers without reliable power for minimum 6 to 10 weeks. The economic cost exceeds $40 billion in direct infrastructure damage, with additional hundreds of billions in economic activity disruption, insurance claims, and long-term investment flight as global capital reassesses the stability of Israeli markets. But the most catastrophic damage is not measured in dollars or casualties. It is measured in shattered assumptions about Israeli invincibility, collapsed faith in American security guarantees, and permanent alteration of the strategic calculus that has governed Middle Eastern geopolitics for 75 years. What does Washington do when the missile defense architecture that 3 administrations promised would keep Israel safe has been exposed as useless? How does the Pentagon explain to Congress that $17 billion of taxpayer money purchased defensive systems that an adversary they publicly dismissed as technologically backward has completely neutralized? What does the president say to the Israeli prime minister when the only honest answer is that America has no solution, no backup plan, and no capability to prevent this catastrophe from repeating whenever Iran chooses? These questions have no good answers, and American officials currently in emergency sessions at the White House, Pentagon, and State Department know it. The policy options being analyzed all involve unacceptable trade-offs. Military retaliation against Iranian launch sites risks escalation to full-scale regional war that could draw in Russia and China as Iranian security guarantors. Diplomatic de-escalation requires accepting Iranian regional dominance and abandoning decades of Middle Eastern policy. Doing nothing confirms American impotence and invites further aggression from adversaries globally who are watching this crisis as proof that American power can be successfully challenged. The crisis is not limited to the immediate missile threat. It extends to fundamental questions about the viability of American military technology, the reliability of American security commitments, and the sustainability of American global influence in an era where adversaries have achieved peer or superior capabilities in critical domains. Israel is discovering tonight that technological superiority is not permanent, that American guarantees are not absolute, and that the strategic environment that allowed offensive operations without fear of devastating retaliation has permanently ended. Iran is demonstrating that patient capability development, strategic surprise, and asymmetric warfare can neutralize overwhelming conventional military superiority. And the world is watching as the unipolar American security architecture that has structured international relations since the Cold War collapses in real time. Every regional power is reassessing its strategic calculations tonight. Saudi Arabia is questioning whether American security guarantees are worth the domestic political cost of alignment with Washington. Turkey is evaluating whether NATO membership provides meaningful protection or simply makes them targets in conflicts that don't serve Turkish interests. Pakistan is wondering whether nuclear weapons remain the ultimate security guarantee or whether cyber capabilities now matter more than warhead counts. The Global South is interpreting tonight's events as confirmation that American hegemony can be successfully resisted, that indigenous capability development can achieve strategic parity with Western powers, and that the era of automatic Western military dominance is ending. The narrative that is forming in capitals from Jakarta to Brasilia to Lagos is not about Iranian aggression or regional instability, but about the successful defiance of Western control and the emergence of genuine multipolarity. This is the permanent end of the world order that emerged from 1991, where American military supremacy was unquestioned and adversaries could be threatened with overwhelming force whenever they challenged Western interests. That order died tonight in the 72 hours where Iran penetrated systems America promised were impregnable and prepared a barrage that Israel cannot stop. History will mark this as the moment when the Middle Eastern power balance shifted irreversibly, when Israeli strategic invulnerability was exposed as myth, when American security guarantees were revealed as hollow, and when the multipolar world order stopped being theoretical future and became operational present. If you want analysis this sharp, this deep, this willing to challenge official narratives and reveal what is actually happening behind the propaganda, subscribe to this channel now to ensure you never miss an update. The mainstream media will spend the next 48 hours repeating official statements and downplaying the significance of what has occurred. This channel will continue providing the analysis that reveals the truth behind the official narrative. The 800 missiles are in final preparation. The cyber attack has disabled Israeli defenses completely. The strategic calculations that governed the Middle East for 75 years have been permanently altered, and the world will never be the same. Your engagement keeps this analysis independent and sharp. Share this breakdown with everyone in your network who is serious about understanding what is actually at stake. Leave your assessment in the comments about where this goes from here. Has this night permanently altered the Middle Eastern power balance, or will Washington find a way to reassert dominance? Stay sharp, stay ahead, and never stop asking the questions that matter.